I've heard some folks wonder if you can read intuitively with the Spirit Keeper's Tarot, given how symbol intensive it is. Upon first glance, it looks like a tarot deck that is so busy with definitive esoteric symbols that it's telling you how to interpret the cards. I disagree. Of course I would. I would. I'm biased, so take what I say with that in mind. First, let's talk about how sometimes this deck might speak back to you in tongues, and even with that statement, not to everybody, but some decks to some of you, yeah, yes, I think so. It can be a little bit different from what you're used to in a tarot deck. You know the concept that a lot of religious traditions hold, which is essentially that when you channel the language of spirit, you end up speaking in tongues. A lot of religious traditions, east, west, north, south, hailing from all continents, have that belief. I've actually found that sometimes the tarot reading you get from the Spirit Keeper's Tarot may at first appear confusing, but it's totally not the same confusion as like not knowing how the Seven of Swords is applicable to a certain question you've asked, or not sure how the textbook meaning of the Strength card fits into a reading. I think the confusion that can sometimes arise from a spread of these cards is a bit different. To me, it feels like what's coming through, even as tarot symbols, is coming through in tongues. It's very interesting. Just take the deck out for a couple of spins and see if you at some point experience what I'm talking about. Not only is it about knowing how to read a tarot deck, but then at times, in a very momentous occasion, readings with the Spirit Keeper's Tarot even comes through in a form of tongues. Like, it's kind of nonsensical at first blush, but instead of fighting it, indulge it, and then it's like a light switch flickers on. Suddenly, spontaneously, you get it, but it's not as constructed ideas or statements of forecast and revelation. It's an imprint of energy. The tongues, the language of the angels you've channeled, leaves you with an imprint of energy, and when you allow yourself to simply feel and receive that imprint of energy, it leaves you with a sudden knowing. If that's not reading tarot intuitively, or the colloquial meaning of reading intuitively, then I don't know what is. I hope you'll experience what I'm talking about. It's very interesting because it is not at all my ordinary style of reading the tarot, and yet it happens to me when I read with the Spirit Keeper's Tarot. If you perceive silence or non-responsiveness, what I do is then say with patience and reverence to that spirit, I will go now, and I will look diligently for the signs and omens you send me. Upon the paths I walk in my life, I will look for you. Then take your exit from that reading session, and over the course of the next few days, do as you say. Look for signs and omens from that spirit. See what interesting divine messages you stumble upon directly in your path or line of sight. Something in the physical world will pull at your attention and focus, and it will have a resonance to the spirit of that particular tarot card that had been silent or non-responsive earlier. The Book of Maps does have a short chapter on reading intuitively. Read that section in conjunction with this video installment. In that chapter, I note how you can ignore all the card entries in the book, even go as far as to ignore what you've learned about tarot card meanings, and just isolate your focus on specific symbols on a card drawn into a reading. Here's my speculation. The tarot deck's imagery isn't squarely Rider-Waite-Smith, which is a deck that comes with like thousands and thousands of tarot books with tarot card meanings to give you authority, and it isn't the Thoth, which has also developed an arguably familiar system of authoritative interpretation that you can work with. On top of all that, you can kind of intuit that the symbolism isn't willy-nilly, and each is sourced from very specific and historically established esoteric traditions. So all that put together, I think one hang-up with reading with this deck is that people are afraid to be wrong. I think the hang-up is a fear that you're reading the deck wrong, that maybe you don't know anything about this magic square or Zoroastrianism or the Catholic hierarchy in Christian angelology or the sigil forms of Persian magic that later got folded into Sufism and Islam or Greek mythology. So you're afraid maybe you aren't getting full mileage out of the deck, and therefore maybe you're wrong. What I have to say to that is, if you think you're reading the deck wrong, then you are. Why? Because you've clearly proven that you're clouding your psychic sensation and your receptivity to the universe, to spirit, with this smokescreen of fear and personal insecurity. Fear and personal insecurity are powerful smoke screens and very difficult to penetrate. So, if you're reading from a place of fear and insecurity, you're off to a pretty bad start. For example, in the written case study that I linked to the preceding guided tarot reading for accessing the Akashic records, I noted that in my own reading, I pulled key 9, the erudite, the classic hermit card, and immediately the name St. Nicholas just kerplunk dropped into my mind. Immediately, I wanted to dismiss the thought. Hell, I'm the deck creator, and I can tell you that is very, very far from my intentions for Key 9. Not to mention, I have no personal sense of connection to St. Nicholas whatsoever. I mean, zero, none, nada. Also, the analytical, I know how to tarot side of me wanted to tisk tisk myself and say, you are so wrong about this. This is white noise. Cancel, cancel, abort. But what this tarot deck has taught me is I need to override those fears, insecurities, this over reliance on tradition and on systems or authority and on what's supposed to be. You see, this inclination to rely on some form of authority to tell me what the scope of a card meaning should be is born entirely out of a place of fear and insecurity, of a fear of being wrong. I had to learn to override that. So by the time I got to this reading for myself, the thought St. Nicholas popped in. I pushed aside my own, no, this is not how you tarot. This is far removed from tradition, from deck creator intentions, from. I can shut that off and lean into what's really coming through, something external from beyond, something piercing through the veil to reach me. And the legends of St. Nicholas of Myra turned out to be wholly relevant to me and just really powerful, really a story I needed to hear and learn lessons from to apply to my life path. And the reason Spirit Keepers Tarot is an entire system of tarot rooted in the conception of spirits with an arrangement of symbols on each key, each realm, almost like a coat of arms, right, to indicate the world of that spirit, is so that the keys in and of themselves can act as sigils, giving these spirits power to pierce through the veil and get the right signals into your brain. That's why, in a sense, I would almost argue that it's imperative for you to read intuitively with this deck and not get bogged down by the historic legacy of each and every alchemical symbol I've featured on a card. You can do that when you're studying, but when you're trying to connect to spirit, my advice is to let spirit talk. Get your ego out of the way, all that personally attained knowledge, and instead let yourself be a landing pad for externalized, dare I say, supernatural thoughts to come in.